Welcome once again to the Chat with the Chaplains. I am Chaplain John Rowe, and my partner in crime here today is Chaplain Ben Schroeder. And today we are going to introduce a new topic, and we're going to be talking about the Sermon on the Mount, or the Beatitudes, as they are called in church rhetoric. So we want you to just join us. Feel free at any time to ask us questions. Of course, you'll have to submit those questions to our office, and we'll catch them on another edition, because we're not live today, Ben. Ben is such a talker. Once you get him started, it's hard to get him to quit, but it's hard to get him started. That was kind of a segue for you to say hello and things like that, Chaplain Ben.
I'm just playing around. Hello.
Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to read through some verses here to set it up, and then I'm going to go back a little bit and give a little more preamble to this, a little scene setting, if you will. But Chaplain Ben, if you would start in Matthew chapter 5, that's where we are today, and we'll start with the things that Jesus said, and then we'll go back and set the scene for it, okay? So if you would start with verse 3 and read through verse 12 for me.
Okay, Matthew 5, starting at verse 3. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you.
Okay. Well, those are some pretty powerful words and kind of go against what they had always been taught. So as Jesus begins to lay this out, I say this is his platform, if you will. These are the policies that he is instituting within the kingdom that he is introducing. Now, if you remember in Matthew, isn't it 11:28, where he says, "Come unto me, ye who are weary and heavy burden." He says, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light." Mm-hmm. So we always think, and we covered this in another chat, but we always think of that yoke as being something that, we wear across our shoulders and we carry 2 water buckets or something. But the actual thing that he was referring to there is every rabbi that had a group of students had what he called his yoke. And what that was the rabbi's belief system and policies that he wanted to teach to his followers. Well, each one tried to make things just a little bit more difficult than what he was taught, because he had to have a new wrinkle to it, or otherwise why would disciples come to him? So they made it very difficult. You have to do this, you have to do that. Jesus said, "Follow me," in the same way that a rabbi, see, each person had to be called by the rabbi in order to study under the rabbi. So he went through all the applications or whatever, and then he would say, "Okay, you follow me, you follow me." And that's what Jesus did. He went around and collected his disciples, and then when he said, "Come to me, you who are weary and heavy laden, and I'll give you rest," my yoke is easy and my burden is light, what he's saying is, I'm not going to put a lot of extra stuff on you. I'm not going to make it more difficult for you to serve God. I'm going to make it easy. I'm going to make the burden light for you. So what he had done here is he was laying out his yoke. He was laying out, this is the syllabus, if you will, for my teaching. And that's what he's doing here in Matthew chapter 5. So we see that, to lay the groundwork, John the Baptist had come and was proclaiming that Jesus was coming. Then Jesus comes and is baptized by John. And then Jesus was in the wilderness and being tempted for 40 days in the wilderness. And then in chapter 4, verse 31, it talks about Jesus began to preach. When he heard that John had been put in jail, Jesus began to preach. In 17, he laid out the basics. 4:17 says, from that time on, Jesus began to preach, repent, for the kingdom of heaven has come near. And then he started calling his disciples, Ben. Why don't you read chapter 4, verses 18 through 20.
18 through 20, chapter 4.
Right.
As Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Come, follow me, Jesus said, and I will make you fishers of men. At once they left their nets and followed him.
There was something about Jesus that just compelled people to follow him. Wherever he went, he attracted a crowd. And when he saw somebody that had a real heart for the things of God, now these two guys were not your real candidates for being preachers. They were fishermen. They were standing probably out in the water, casting their nets, and Jesus said, hey, put the nets down and follow me. And I'm going to make you fishers of men. I'm going to have you fish for people. Now, I got to tell you, Ben, I've been married for almost 49 years. Before I go fishing, I got to talk to my wife about it. But if I was a fisherman, before I quit my job, I better talk to somebody, I couldn't just quit my job and follow some stranger, but there was something compelling about Jesus. And then when we get over to verse 23 of that, it says, Jesus went throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, healing every disease and sickness among the people. News about him spread all over Syria, and people brought to him all who were ill with various diseases, those suffering severe pain, the demon-possessed, those having seizures, and the paralyzed, and he healed them. Large crowds from Galilee, the Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, and the region across the Jordan followed him. Now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. So what Jesus had done to start with is he went around doing good. He went around preaching, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is near. He went around healing people from various diseases, casting out demons, raising the dead. He gathered a following, because otherwise, if Jesus had just gone up on the mountainside and started preaching, he'd have been preaching to a few goats and maybe a few sheep. But he had gone around and he had kind of established that there was something special about him. And he had collected some disciples that now needed to start their training. So now he is starting their training. It says when he saw the crowds, he knew that he had been successful in drawing a crowd, that people were interested in what he had to say, and that gave him some weight for his teaching. Hey, we should listen to this guy, because who can do the things that this Jesus guy is doing? I mean, Ben, wouldn't you, if there was some guy going around the community emptying out the hospital and emptying out the insane asylums where people were out of their minds because of demon possession and things? Not that everyone we don't have insane asylums anymore, but
Right.
where they were demon possessed and tormented and screaming and things, and he was healing them. And I would think that if somebody started doing that in Wapaka, it wouldn't take long for him to draw a crowd. What do you think?
Right. Absolutely. And some of the things that he was doing were fulfillments of prophecies from the Old Testament. So healing the sick, giving sight to the blind, and now preaching good news to the poor. This is kind of like his first sermon, we could say. So, yeah, it would attract attention.
Right. I just had a thought, and it just flew over me like a bird
Happens to me
flying
all
over
the
my
time.
head.
More like an F-16 for me.
Yeah.
Keep going.
When it says he sat down and his disciples came to him and he began to teach them. Oh, I was going to say, in our country and in our society today, we kind of put religious teaching as usually a once a week thing. You go for an hour on Sunday morning, or maybe an hour and a half if you've got a real musical church and they like to sing. Or you go to some type of a Christian discipleship class or Sunday school, CCD type things, confirmation classes. And you go, but it's not attached to everything else that you do. It's just kind of, I'm going along. Oh, yeah, it's Sunday, I got to go to church. It's Wednesday night, I've got to go to class, whatever. It wasn't that way in ancient Israel, was it? Everything revolved around the church. Do you have any thoughts on that, on why people would see this as him being maybe the Messiah, because this is what they've been taught from early on, right?
Mm-hmm. Can you clarify your question, what you mean by that?
If you're confused,
This is not. You're comparing the two settings that we're in. Two settings: the one that we're in today, and then the one that they were in. So life revolved around their religious beliefs and their religious practices.
If we were to do a man on the street interview today and say, "Who is Jesus?" we'd get a whole lot of non-answers.
Yes.
And a few answers.
And crazy answers, right?
In that day, when you went out and did a man in the street, who is the Messiah?
Mm-hmm.
They would be able to tell you about the Messiah because it was
saturating their
steeped
culture.
into their culture. Right. The whole fabric of everything. So,
gotcha.
When you said they would see these things that had been prophesied,
it would click in their mind.
It would click in their mind,
Yeah.
where it might not mean anything to us. We'd say, "Oh, this guy's some kind of magician.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
doing this stuff." But then they were so tuned in to looking for the Messiah, longing
Yes.
for the Messiah. Every young girl was taught that she could be the mother of the Messiah.
Yes.
And so all of this training was constantly taking place.
Yes. So you're saying that it's possible in the minds of some of them, could this be the one?
Could this be the guy?
promised Messiah?
So they started following him, and then, of course, those that believed he was the Messiah, I'm sure they were telling others, "Hey, this guy could be the Messiah. We need to listen to him. We need to find out what's going on here."
Mm-hmm.
So he drew a crowd.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But he had these disciples because he had a bigger picture in mind. He knew that one day he would be leaving, and he would have to leave this good news in the hands of others to be spread because he wouldn't be here anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So he wanted his yoke, if we want to refer to it that way, he wanted his mission statement to be known. He wanted it to be known what he believed and what he was going to put into place. So he started here by laying the groundwork for the next 2.5 years or whatever it may have been at that point in time, leading up to his crucifixion and ultimate death and resurrection. He wanted people to get these basics. Have you ever taken a class that said this other class was a prerequisite for that class? What does that mean if one's a prerequisite for the other?
Well, there's foundational teachings that are going to be presented in that class that your next class is going to depend on you being knowledgeable on.
If you don't know basic math, you're never going to get algebra. And if you don't know algebra and basic math, you're never going to understand some of the higher math that's going on.
Right.
So Jesus is saying here, he's laying out the foundational materials that this is what's going to be happening. So I know we're not getting real far into the Beatitudes today, but I want to lay out the foundational material. Jesus has come onto the scene. He was proclaimed by John to be the coming Messiah. He began to minister throughout the region, and people began to follow him. He began to call disciples, and now he says, now we have the pieces in place so that we can begin to teach, and so that people will hear and understand why it is I'm doing this, what the ultimate goal of all of this is. So it said when he saw the crowds, 5:1, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. The disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. Now, I think, if I remember a little bit of the Jewish synagogue and Jewish history and stuff, when the teacher was ready to teach, he sat down. Sort of like we're doing today. When I'm preaching, I stand up, but when I'm teaching, I end up
It's a cultural thing.
sitting down, just the cultural thing. And then he said, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now, you will see various places where it says blessed. That word blessed means happy. I think that's a very shallow definition of that word blessed or blessed. You have any thoughts on that, Ben?
Yeah, I agree. So, we've probably heard that sort of description of the difference between happiness and joy, and I think that would relate to this understanding of blessedness. Happiness depends on happenings and circumstances, right?
Right.
And typically, and joy is independent of circumstances and happenings. It's the undercurrent below the surface that kind of can be maintained and consistently there. A sense of joy and security and knowing that you're in God's care and God's keeping. So I think when it says blessed here, that's what it's referring to. It's referring to a deeper sense of just security and knowledge of knowing that God has His favor on you. You're blessed. You're blessed.
It's much more than a momentary, I'm happy because I got a new thing. To me, that blessed just goes right to the very core of your soul. That being blessed in that way, it gives you happiness. It gives you joy. It gives you a sense of belonging. It gives you this security. I've sat under some teaching where they really talked about two of the greatest needs of men and women is for significance and security. And they were very insignificant in that day in the Roman domination of them. A Roman soldier could force them to do just about anything. And they had that insecurity And they were insignificant. They were just, to the Romans, they were nothing but to be kicked around and taken advantage of and everything. And they were really kind of humbled and poor in spirit, even though they knew they were God's chosen people. Even though they knew that God favored them, they had this expectation of a Messiah that would come and help them in everything they were doing and would set them free from that. And here he's saying, blessed is the poor in spirit. Blessed are you who have been beat down, trodden down. Don't think you're really of any value, because yours is the kingdom of heaven. And I think we've used up just about all of our introduction time this morning.
My favorite part of the whole thing. I'll have to come back again. Might not be me next week. You see, he did all the talking, but I was just ready to start to share some things, and then he's going to cut me off. That's how it is with me.
Next week, I will expect a lot more verbiage out of you.
If I'm here, yeah.
Because we are going to talk about this, what it really means to be poor in spirit.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And receiving the kingdom of heaven. Today, you might be feeling, members, audience, folks listening, you might be feeling insignificant. You might be feeling like everything you have has been taken away from you and that you are left with nothing. Guess what? That's who Jesus is talking to. And we'll pick it up next week. May the grace and peace of our Lord Jesus Christ be with you all, and we'll see you on the next chat.